Hey everyone, it's Robbie here. With the anniversary of September 11th coming up, I felt it was the right time to revisit a topic that sparked a lot of conversations last month, the mastermind behind 9/11. This video isn't just about rehashing what you've already heard. It's about digging deeper, asking tough questions, and exploring the full scope of what happened on that tragic day. Welcome back to Breakthrough Builders, where we take on topics that shape our lives in unexpected ways. Today, we're diving into something a little different, but just as important. Let's explore how events from our past still influence the way we think, act, and grow today. "9/11 is personal for all of us. We remember where we were, how we felt, and how it changed our world forever. For me, it's more than just a historical event. It's a turning point that still shapes our lives today. After seeing the responses to my last video, I knew I had to go deeper. So here we are. Today we're going to cover everything from the official narrative to the conspiracy theories that refuse to go away. We'll talk about what we know, what we think we know, and what we still need to ask. And throughout this video, I want to hear from you. I'll be running polls, so be sure to participate and share your thoughts. Let's start by setting the stage. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 terrorists from the extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial airplanes. 2 of those planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. 1 crashed into the Pentagon. And the 4th, intended for another target in Washington, D.C., crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers heroically fought back. This was a coordinated attack, meticulously planned over years, led by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind behind 9/11. But what led to this? How did these terrorists come to hate America so deeply that they were willing to die to kill innocent civilians? Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, often referred to as KSM, is the man credited with devising the plan for 9/11. He's been called the architect of the attacks, but he didn't act alone. Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, provided the funding and overall direction for the operation. Together, they turned Al-Qaeda into a global terrorist network with the capability to strike the United States on its own soil. We also need to discuss how these men came to power. Bin Laden, once a freedom fighter against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, was seen by some as a hero, but his ideology took a dark turn, fueled by a hatred for Western influence in the Middle East and the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia. KSM, on the other hand, was a more shadowy figure, a master strategist with a history of involvement in terrorist activities. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the U.S. government launched the War on Terror, targeting Al-Qaeda and its affiliates around the world. This led to the invasion of Afghanistan, where the Taliban government had given refuge to bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. The government also passed the Patriot Act, which expanded surveillance and law enforcement powers in an effort to prevent future attacks. To understand how far the reach of government surveillance has extended post 9/11, let's look at the NSA's bulk data collection program. This program, revealed by whistleblower Edward Snowden in 2013, involved the collection of millions of Americans' phone records without their knowledge. This program was justified as a necessary measure to prevent terrorism, but it sparked a massive debate about privacy and the limits of government power. The controversy lies in whether such surveillance was truly effective. Despite the massive amount of data collected, many argue that it did little to prevent attacks and instead eroded trust in government institutions. This example highlights the ongoing tension between security and civil liberties, a theme that has become central to discussions about post-9/11 America. Public reaction and government trust. The days and months following 9/11 saw a united America, but that unity eventually gave way to skepticism and mistrust. People started questioning the government's actions. Was the invasion of Iraq justified? Were the new surveillance laws infringing on our rights? The initial trust in the government's response began to erode. This sentiment was echoed in one of the comments from my last video by Asapzes4J, who said, "This is disgusting. This is the very reason why people nowadays have a hatred and mistrust for the government." It's a feeling that resonates with many people today, and it's something we need to talk about. Key comments discussion. Another comment by El Chicano 187 caught my attention. "You must understand that for them that is considered freedom." This comment really made me think freedom is a powerful word, and its meaning can change depending on your perspective. For some, freedom means safety from terror, even if it means giving up some privacy. For others, freedom means being able to live without the government watching your every move. Comparing international responses. The U.S. wasn't alone in ramping up security measures post 9/11. The UK, for instance, enacted the Prevention of Terrorism Act following the 7/7 London bombings. This act, much like the Patriot Act in the U.S., expanded police powers and increased surveillance. However, the UK's approach also included a focus on community relations, particularly with Muslim communities, to prevent radicalization. By comparing these responses, we can see different strategies in balancing security with civil liberties. While the U.S. took a more aggressive surveillance approach, the UK's emphasis on community engagement presents an alternative that we might consider in evaluating our own policies. Let's get your input. Do you trust the government's account of 9/11? Yes or no? Vote in the poll, and let's see where we stand as a community. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. Next, let's tackle the elephant in the room, conspiracy theories. Over the years, several theories have emerged that challenge the official narrative of 9/11. These range from the idea that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition to claims that the U.S. government knew about the attacks in advance and let them happen, or even orchestrated them. One of the most persistent conspiracy theories is the claim that no plane actually hit the Pentagon. Proponents of this theory argue that the damage to the Pentagon doesn't match what would be expected from a Boeing 757. They point to the lack of visible wreckage, the small impact hole, and the limited release of surveillance footage as evidence that something else, perhaps a missile, caused the damage. However, let's consider the evidence that counters this theory. Eyewitnesses reported seeing a plane hit the Pentagon, and parts of the plane, including the black box, were recovered from the site. The angle and speed at which the plane hit the building could explain the damage pattern and the distribution of debris. Furthermore, the limited release of surveillance footage is often cited as suspicious, but this could be attributed to national security concerns. The government may have withheld certain details to prevent revealing sensitive security information. Conspiracy theories like this one persist partly because of the government's secrecy and the public's desire for transparency. When the full story isn't immediately available, people fill in the gaps with speculation. It's a reminder of the importance of open communication and accountability in maintaining public trust. So what does the evidence say? Most experts agree that the physical evidence combined with the flight data, black box recordings, and eyewitness testimonies supports the conclusion that Flight 77 did indeed hit the Pentagon. But the lack of transparency from the government has fueled speculation and distrust. Here's another poll for you. Do you believe a plane hit the Pentagon on September 11th? Yes or no? Vote now, and let's see where this community stands on this controversial topic. Freedom versus security debate. Following September 11th, the U.S. government passed the Patriot Act, which expanded the powers of law enforcement and intelligence agencies. This legislation allowed for increased surveillance of citizens, expanded the government's ability to detain and deport immigrants suspected of terrorism-related activities, and gave the authorities greater power to search personal records. The intent behind these measures was clear: to prevent another attack like September 11th from happening. But these actions raised significant concerns about the balance between national security and civil liberties. Many Americans began to question whether the government was overstepping its bounds, infringing on privacy, and eroding the very freedoms it was supposed to protect. Over the years, public opinion on these issues has been divided. Some people believe that the measures taken were necessary and have made us safer. Others argue that they have come at too high a cost, sacrificing civil liberties for the illusion of security. This debate continues to this day, with ongoing discussions about the reach of government surveillance, the impact on minority communities, and the effectiveness of these measures in preventing terrorism. Supporters argue that these measures are essential for national security. They point out that the nature of terrorism has changed. It's no longer just about large-scale attacks, but also about lone wolves and sleeper cells that are harder to detect. In this context, widespread surveillance is seen as a necessary tool to identify and stop potential threats before they materialize. Critics, however, argue that this level of surveillance is a dangerous overreach. They contend that it infringes on privacy rights guaranteed by the Constitution and creates a big brother state where the government has too much control over citizens' personal lives. They also point out that the surveillance programs often lack transparency. The public is generally unaware of the full extent of the data being collected, how it's being used, or how it's being stored. This secrecy breeds distrust and raises concerns about potential abuses of power. Critics often reference historical precedents where government surveillance has been used to target political dissidents, activists, and minority communities. For example, during the civil rights movement, the FBI conducted extensive surveillance of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., often using this information to discredit or disrupt their activities. After 9/11, Muslim Americans and those perceived to be Muslim, including Arabs and South Asians and Sikhs, faced increased scrutiny, both from law enforcement and from the public. The government's focus on homegrown terrorism led to a surge in racial profiling, where individuals were targeted based on their ethnicity or religion, rather than any concrete evidence of wrongdoing. This has led to a climate of fear and suspicion in many communities. Innocent people have been detained, interrogated, and surveilled simply because of their background. This not only violates their civil rights, but also undermines the trust between these communities and law enforcement, making it harder to cooperate in genuine cases of concern. The government also expanded its powers to detain and deport immigrants suspected of being involved in terrorism-related activities. However, critics argue that these powers have been used too broadly, affecting people who have no connection to terrorism. The immigration system, already complex and fraught with challenges, became even more difficult for those from Muslim-majority countries. The implementation of special registration programs and travel bans have disproportionately affected these communities, leading to family separations, lost opportunities, and widespread fear of deportation. In some cases, entire communities have been subjected to surveillance, with law enforcement infiltrating mosques, community centers, and even student groups. This has created an environment where people feel they are constantly being watched, leading to self-censorship and a reluctance to engage in normal activities for fear of attracting unwanted attention. Argument 3, effectiveness in preventing terrorism. Supporters argue that the measures taken after 9/11 have been crucial in preventing further attacks. They point to the lack of large-scale terrorist incidents on U.S. soil since 9/11 as evidence that these strategies are working. According to this view, the expanded surveillance, intelligence sharing, and counterterrorism efforts have disrupted plots and prevented potential tragedies. Critics, however, challenge this narrative. They argue that while there have been successes, there have also been failures, instances where surveillance didn't stop an attack or where the measures were overblown and targeted the wrong people. There's also the argument that these measures have had unintended consequences. For example, the perception of constant surveillance and the targeting of specific communities can lead to radicalization, as individuals feel alienated and oppressed by the state. Instead of preventing terrorism, these actions might, in some cases, contribute to the very problem they aim to solve. Additionally, critics point to the opportunity costs of focusing so heavily on surveillance and security. Resources that could be used for community building, education, and other preventive measures are instead funneled into programs that may do more harm than good in the long run. This debate is far from settled. On one side, there's the argument that the post-9/11 measures have kept us safe and are necessary in a world where the threat of terrorism is ever present. On the other side, there's a deep concern that these measures have eroded civil liberties, targeted minority communities, and ultimately made us less free. I want to hear from you. Do you believe the government's post-9/11 measures have made us safer? Yes or no? Vote in the poll, and let's continue this conversation. In my last video, I received some pretty strong reactions. One comment that stood out was from Harold Dumas P9E, who said, "You should get an education." Now, I want to take a moment to engage in a conversation about this, because it's a sentiment that reflects a broader issue, how we talk about controversial topics like 9/11. First off, I appreciate all feedback, positive or negative, because it means you're engaged. But I think we need to distinguish between criticism and constructive dialogue. Simply telling someone to get an education without explaining what you disagree with doesn't move the conversation forward. It shuts it down. So let's open it back up. Education isn't a one-time thing, it's a lifelong process. And when it comes to a topic as complex as 9/11, there's always more to learn. I'm not claiming to be the ultimate authority on this subject. I'm here to explore, ask questions, and engage with you all in a meaningful way. For example, let's look at the conspiracy theories we discussed earlier. Some people might dismiss them outright, while others might fully believe them. But what's crucial is understanding why these theories exist, what evidence supports them, and what evidence refutes them. That's part of educating ourselves. Engaging with different perspectives. Why different perspectives matter. We all come from different backgrounds and have different experiences that shape our views. What's important is that we approach these discussions with an open mind. For instance, someone who lived through 9/11 in New York City might have a very different perspective than someone who was a child at the time and learned about it later. To really understand a topic, we need to be willing to listen to others, even if we disagree with them. That's how we build a more complete picture of the truth. Understanding the skepticism. Why are people skeptical? Skepticism often comes from a place of distrust. Distrust in the government, in the media, and in the institutions that are supposed to keep us informed. And let's be honest, there have been times when these institutions have let us down. So it's natural for people to question the official narratives, especially when those narratives involve something as significant as 9/11. But skepticism should be accompanied by a willingness to dig deeper, to seek out reliable information, and to challenge our own assumptions. It's easy to say, I don't believe the official story, but it's much harder to back that up with evidence and reasoned arguments. Invitation to dialogue, encouraging open conversation. I want to invite everyone, whether you agree with me or not, to engage in this conversation. Let's talk about what you believe, why you believe it, and what evidence you found. If you think I got something wrong, let's discuss it. I'm here to learn just as much as you are. And to Harold Dumas P9E and others who feel similarly, what specific areas do you think I need to learn more about? Let's make this an opportunity for both of us to grow in our understanding. Critical thinking and fact-checking, the role of critical thinking. Critical thinking is essential, especially in today's world where misinformation can spread so easily. Whether we're talking about the official story or a conspiracy theory, we need to ask the right questions. What evidence supports this claim? Is the source reliable? What do experts say? I encourage everyone watching to take the time to fact-check the information you come across. Don't just accept it at face value. It's not about being cynical, it's about being informed. Final thoughts on criticism, constructive versus destructive criticism. At the end of the day, criticism can be incredibly valuable when it's constructive. It pushes us to think more deeply, to research more thoroughly, and to communicate more clearly. But it's important that we approach these discussions with respect and a genuine desire to understand each other. So, to everyone who's been critical of my work, thank you. You've given me the opportunity to reflect, to learn, and to engage in a deeper conversation with all of you. Let's keep this dialogue going. Whether you agree with me or not, your voice matters in this conversation. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss this topic in more depth. I'll be reading through and responding because this isn't just about me sharing my thoughts. It's about us exploring this complex issue together. Reflecting on my own journey, I remember how 9/11 changed the way I saw the world. The initial shock, followed by a mix of fear, anger, and confusion, shaped my understanding of security and freedom. Over the years, my views have evolved, influenced by the information I've learned and the stories I've heard. One thing that stands out to me is how 9/11 impacted our sense of security. Before that day, the idea of a major terrorist attack on American soil seemed almost unthinkable. But in the aftermath, it became clear that the world had changed, and with it, our approach to safety and privacy. If there's one lesson I've learned, it's the importance of staying informed and critically evaluating the information we're given. It's easy to accept the official narrative, but it's just as important to question it and seek out different perspectives. That's what drives me to create content like this, to explore, to ask questions, and to engage with all of you on these vital issues. Today, we've covered a lot of ground, from the historical context of 9/11 to the ongoing debates about surveillance, freedom, and the rise of conspiracy theories. We've looked at how these issues continue to shape our world and our perceptions of government trust. As we move forward, I encourage you to keep asking questions, to keep learning, and to stay engaged in these conversations. If you found value in this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion